be correct, right? Like it's not going to be perfect. There's, Tesla has a lot of opportunities and failures that, they're sort of hand in hand, and it could be viewed both ways. So, I want to be, I think we all want to be accurate and as best as possible. And I think this space aspires for that in a way that you don't really get on like first view in those conversations. Like Tesla bulls have come up to me and been like, "How are you a bull?" I'm like, "Do you want me to show you my purchase history?" Like, I don't know what to say. But it's hard on Twitter because the like the way you sort of are on an odyssey and you're ready to fuck someone up when you disagree with them, and that's what this platform somewhat encourages. But also, there's a lot to it. The more you engage with someone, and don't block them. Like I got blocked by some guy working at Cruise, and I felt bad because we're all humans. But that's the thing. I like this space a lot, and Fudd pissed me off, but he's grown on me. And I follow him just because of who he is, not because of the account.
Okay, great. There you go. That's really good. There you go. And yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. All right. Well, let's move forward. Um, so actually, let's talk about the Gallup poll. Do you want to start it out?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because one of the things they said was obviously we're hearing about this EV slowdown, and there was previously no evidence to support it. It was just okay, well, people are just saying it's slowing down, and then we see that okay, there's a 7% drop in the, or at least a 7% increase in the amount of people who are saying definitely not going to buy EV, and that's 48%. And the amount that are definitely considering is 9%. And in 2023, 7.6% was the amount that bought BEV. So it's kind of interesting to see how is this going to play out because, for example, last year there was more people that were interested in buying BEVs, and now it seems like the amount of interest is less. So because right now, according to the poll, there's 35% of total amount of people that are considering to buy an EV. It seems interesting how some people are claiming, well, we're going to get to 50% because if only 35% are considering, you need to really move up the advertising game. And I think back then, I think when I was a bull, I obviously very highly advocated for advertising. And I think they're doing a really good job in this advertising camp. And I think we could discuss probably some of the strategies that the industry can do in order to increase adoption. I think also opening up NACS is going to severely increase adoption in the US and reduce this range anxiety. So that's an interesting discussion we can have.
Yeah. I actually want to read this article first. Start out a little slow and kind of get our facts right. Make sure we're all on the same page. While YouTube figures out their streaming game. The post is at the top of your screens. This is the article from The Hill. So let's read the article first, and then there is and in reply to that, I have the Gallup poll as well. So both of those are at the top of your screen. So I'm going to read this real quick. So this article by The Hill was published a few days ago, just a few days ago. So it's very recent, April 8th, morning of April 8th. More Americans said in 2024 that they would not consider purchasing an EV than in 2023, a new Gallup poll found. The poll found that 48% of respondents said they would not consider buying an electric vehicle, up 7 percentage points than those who said the same in 2023. 35% said in the latest survey they might consider purchasing one, and 9% said they were seriously considering it. The new poll also found that the percentage of Americans who said they owned an EV ticked up slightly in 2024, with 7% saying they have one. Last year, 4% said they owned an EV. So obviously the sales are increasing, the market share is increasing, but the intention, which could be an indication for future sales, is down 7 percentage points from 2023. So that's from 55% in 2023 to 48% recently. The Biden administration finalized a rule last month that could result in 56% of new vehicles on the market being electric by 2032. While the rule does not mandate a shift to EVs, it sets pollution standards for an automaker's vehicle fleet. So that's irrelevant. Another irrelevant paragraph. And then it says Democrats surveyed by Gallup are more likely to say they are considering an EV, with 15% saying they're considering buying one and 46% saying they may consider one. 9% said they already own an EV, while 27% said they would not consider buying one. Republicans are much more likely to oppose buying an EV, with 69% saying they would not buy one. 22% said they may consider purchasing one, but just 2% that they're seriously considering it. And here's the data behind the poll. The poll was conducted March 1 to 20th among 1,016 adults and has a margin of error of 4 percentage points. So that's very good poll. Very good. Very recent data. Good amount of data. Let's see if there's any request to speak. I know Machine would love this data, but Omar is here as well. Yoda is here if they want to come up and talk about it. And Machine's probably working right now because we started early. This space is only an X right now because YouTube is having some issues going live. So, Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing great. I was just having breakfast with my family, and I was driving my Cybertruck, and as I was parking, this Asian grandma, she must have been 60, 70 years old. She came up to me and she's staring at me. I thought maybe I was like parking in front of her house or something. She goes, "How many seats it have?" I go, "Oh, 5." She go, "Okay, roll down window. I want to see inside." She go, "Oh, very good. Much better than SUV." And I'm like, "Shit, is she gonna buy a Cybertruck?"
That's really funny. Yeah, maybe we will see some 80-year-olds riding on FSD in the Cybertruck in the future.
It sounds like it. I mean, the appeal of this vehicle is very surprising. And of course, so I see my family, they go, "Oh my God, you guys got the Cybertruck?" So then, like, the little kids are getting in, and, you know, everybody's like, wants to take a ride. And they were like, "Oh my God, this is so cool." And then we got back in, and they're like, "You guys need to all get Cybertrucks. This is way better." So it was definitely a hit.
All right. What do you think about? Let's talk about this poll by Gallup that was conducted March 1 through 20th, polling more than 1,000 adults with 4 percentage points margin of error, showing a 7 percentage point drop in intention of buying an EV from 2023 to 2024. What are your thoughts initially on that? The articles are at the top of your screens.
Well, it is highlighting a little bit of the EV blowback I've been talking about. We have this period of tremendous EV growth. Now there's a little bit of blowback. People talking about things like, "Oh, I don't want to have to wait to charge. I don't want to be stuck in a line. Oh, my Electrify America station got broken." All of these things caused. So you're seeing a little bit of that in the poll. But generally, the poll results are pretty good. I mean, we have about 8% of new vehicle sales in the US electric for 2023. So if, 42% are saying they're considering buying one, right? I mean, they're trying to spin this as a negative. Oh, most people say they wouldn't buy one. But, if 42% are saying they're going to consider one and 8% bought last year, hmm. And then, okay, they're saying this, but then it went from what, 4 to 8%? Or what did they say? Owned an EV? 4 to 6 or something?
47, 47.
4 to 7%. Okay, yeah. So, pretty strong growth there. Um, I think a lot of these concerns need to be addressed in one way or another, right? And the oil industry's pushing back. That's the other thing, is these guys are fighting hard because the regulators are saying, okay, well, let's raise corporate average fuel economy standards so that 2/3 of the vehicles produced in the 2030s have to be electric. And they're fighting back and they're saying this is going to cost us billions of dollars if we can't comply. Or even if we do comply, it'll still cost us billions of dollars to comply. So they're fighting back, and the Biden administration's relaxing it a little bit. So, they're having some genuine success with that. But generally, I think, it does look like people are adopting EVs. There's going to be periods of, faster growth and slower growth. Things are growing fast, then people say, oh, okay, I had a bad experience. I had a bad experience charging my Mach-E or something like that. And then you see a little bit of this sort of blowback. And then the industry responds, hopefully. Hopefully they get out some, you know, public messaging to fight against, the oil and legacy auto industry who are pushing hard in the other direction, pushing back against EVs. And just say, hey, this is good for these reasons. And you have, of course, Tesla opening up the supercharger network. I think that's a really important thing to address one of the major concerns about EVs, which is charging. And just, okay, nobody has to have a disaster charging experience. That's, I think, really important. And, then I think, affordability too, that's another thing people are improving on. But even if it's affordable, people are not going to look for an EV if they don't feel that their concerns are met. So this is kind of the big problem. It's not necessarily pricing, but it's that most people don't want an EV. So how do we make it so most people want an EV?
All right. I pinned the main chart at the top, and let's kind of read through. I'm going to read through this real quick. 7% of Americans, up from 4% a year ago, report that they own an EV. That increase is matched by an equal decline in the percentage saying they're seriously considering buying one, from 12% to 9%. Okay. Meanwhile, fewer Americans, down from 43% in 23, say they might consider buying an EV in the future. Thus, even as some people have moved ahead with their intent to buy an EV in the past year, public demand for the cars has contracted. And let's get what Uziobi has to say real quick, and then we're going to turn to Omar to get thoughts on the division between Democrats, the data on Democrats versus Republicans. There's a lot of data in this poll. There's some income, intention by income as well. Go ahead, Uziobi.
It would be great to get your perspective, especially those who've been covering for since 2019. If this period sort of feels like the 2019 period where Tesla is sort of uh, getting through, I guess that I heard what's her name, Kathy Wood sort of mentioned how this period felt like 2019, and I could sort of see as the cars, the cars have been out for so long. And a 25K car might be appealing to lower income people, and the federal tax credits might be appealing. But I think what's really interesting to people is FSD and Cybertruck, and I actually like that the people that are more interested in Tesla now are higher income and they're willing to spend for these novel products, basically. But I'm wondering if there's merit to an argument that Tesla now is sort of, there's a rhyme to 2019.
Um, sorry, was there a question in there?
Yeah, like is do you would you perceive this period as similar to the period when Tesla was first, getting the early adopters buying their cars?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very similar in terms of sentiment to 2019, but I think the EV adoption is much further along today than it was in 2018, 2019. Like back then, for example, I'll give you one example. Back then, a lot of people were concerned about Tesla going bankrupt, and people were posting on X and elsewhere that they chose, say, a Chevy Bolt because they thought GM was more sustainable in terms of kind of future, like it's going to be around in the future versus Tesla. And those people are kind of kicking themselves now. But yeah, I think it's more similar in today versus 2019 in stock market sentiment than kind of fundamentals of the company. All right, Omar, what do you think about the difference between by party identification? Democrats say by far they're more likely to consider or seriously consider buying an EV in the future versus Republicans, even today, after all the saga with Elon's tweets, etc.
Right. I mean, this is what people are missing. Democrats already like EVs. They believe in climate change generally. They believe that the government should do things to help prevent climate change. Whereas Republicans, these are like the people who are actually running the businesses that are being taxed, for example, to reduce emissions, right? And from their perspective, it's like, okay, so you're gonna fuck me over because in 100 years some shit might happen? This is bullshit, right? So there's a legitimate divide about what the government should do. Some on the right might even say, how do we even know climate change is real or is really going to happen? The Earth's climate, fluctuates, you know. And I think air pollution is something that is bad and it's kind of hard to deny, but generally Republicans, they don't believe in, strong government action. They believe in more sort of laissez-faire, let people do whatever they want, let the market kind of regulate itself. And they believe EVs are stupid. They believe that they are propped up by government incentives and that they don't work economically on their own. And the current administration championing EVs and previous administration championing EVs, it was Barack Obama's administration who gave us the first EV tax credit and said, yes, we need EVs. And Biden continued that. Biden was Obama's VP, of course. He continued that in his presidency. So EVs have come to be viewed as a left wing thing that, oh, the Democrats are trying to push this bullshit on us and it doesn't even work. So it's become, quite common over the years for people on the right to make fun of EVs as a way of making fun of the Democrats, right? Because if an EV is a stupid solution that doesn't work and the Democrats are mandating it, well, then that just shows how stupid the Democrats are, right? And it's really become kind of a hot button political issue, this election in particular, given the Inflation Reduction Act and the major sort of climate legislation that Biden has passed. And I mean, you saw Trump go out to the UAW in Michigan and he said, they're going to kill the auto industry. They're saying switch to EVs. You guys are all going to die. You're not going to be able to survive. And it's all going to be China. So this is the sort of fear he's trying to play off of. This change is going to kill you. This is what Biden's doing. He's going to kill the auto industry. And so it's become sort of a major political issue that's only going to heat up between now and November, especially given that, these are battleground states. They could go red or blue, states like Michigan, for example. And these are really key states to winning the election. Like these states are going to decide
Yeah,
who's president. People
and then
saying, oh my God, Elon can't piss off the liberals. He can't piss off the liberals. But, the liberals may curse at him, but they keep buying Teslas. It's really actually the Republicans that we need to convince to buy EVs.
yeah, And then the Gallup poll also has data on by income level and age group. The age group that's seriously considering currently on or seriously considering is 13% highest and might consider in the future 38%. So the combination is very high, is 30 to 49 years old, which is the primary age group that listens to this Tesla Live as well. And, that's where Tesla's future is. And then the 50, 64-year-old age group. But then 65 plus year olds, 63% will not buy, 30% might consider. That's like the lowest intention to buy, the older folks. I wonder why that is.
Well, they're going to be
Maybe
dead soon anyway. They're just too used to their ways. When you get that old, nobody
Yeah.
can, convince you to do anything new.
Yeah. And then 18 to 29 is slightly lower. And that's why I'm trying to bring up more speakers from that age group. Dylan Fonseca is in the audience, and he's a patron, a good follower, and I even met him for coffee the other day. And he lives in Austin. And in that demographic, I think we have some work to do. Even on X, like we don't really get a lot of like on Tesla, in Tesla, Twitter, we don't get a lot of posts from that age group, teenagers or early 20s kind of thing.
I don't know. I
But
disagree. I
obviously
see quite a
that's
bit of them. I would have thought that age group would be stronger than, any other age group, really. Just based on what I see in real life and, some of the people I talk to on X.
yeah. I mean, it says 42% might consider in the future, but yeah. I
For
wonder. I mean,
18
if
and
they're
to 29?
exactly, exactly. But if there are people in the audience from that demographic, age 18 to 29 or even younger, you're welcome to come up to speak and share your views, share what you hear among your friend groups, because that would be perspective that's just not represented right now in this space. So I highly encourage younger folks to come up to speak, reply to posts, and kind of get more engaged with the community. Uziobi?
I mean, I am 22, so I sort of fit into that youth movement. And I wasn't really interested in Tesla until like 2 or 3 years ago when, not 2 or 3 years ago, actually 2 or 3 years ago. And then I read the Walter Isaacson book, and that was like really like a spiritual thing for me, man. And I think talking to my friends more about it now that I really care about the company and now actually the X community, people in my age group don't care for Twitter before Elon got it. It was sort of an old man's app. And getting on this app is also just like a learning experience for people in that age group. And adding on top of that, the economy for people are like 20 years olds. We don't really have that much money. Like, but it's hard enough with inflation and everything like that. Our parents are the ones buying the cars. We're the ones telling them what to do. And like that's really how it goes. Like we're not the ones with the purses yet. I mean, we're working to get there and investing in Tesla to get there too. But I really hope I'm right on that one. and I really think the more youth, like you're gonna get more shit posting and more like um, a lot more dialogue and engagement. But they also, they're young, so they like to beef.
All right, that's great to hear. That's great. Thanks for sharing. That's awesome. And it's good to have you on the speaker board. Joseph, go ahead.
Hey guys, I think with my age group, I'm 28 years old. Tesla's really become misunderstood over the last 2 years. I mean, people like us understand it, but it's kind of a little disheartening how much damage the brand has taken over the last 2 years. And stock's been cut in half, and no one my age wants to buy it. And no one my age wants to buy a Tesla car because there's just no push to actually educate the public. My mom, I've had a Tesla Model X for the last 4 years. Still every winter, she tells me that car is gonna go, and obviously it's not. I own a, I have plenty of clients. No one is interested in buying a Tesla. And I feel like in 2020, going into 2021, we really missed that opportunity as a community and as an investor base. Curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are. 414 to now 170 is pretty scary. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, well, we don't really discuss the short-term stock price movement here that much, and I don't think it has much to do with younger folks buying or selling the stock. We've discussed here the fundamental trends in the company. When I say, I want to encourage younger folks to come up, I mean more about kind of understanding the sentiments on the company and Elon products, not the stock price.
I think sentiment topped out 3 years ago on all the above.
Okay, so can you maybe tell us any specific observations that you've seen among your friend groups towards, like, that kind of speak to the sentiment towards the
Sure,
product?
lack
So,
of trust and awareness when it comes to the product. I know that the product is great. No one in my age cohort knows nearly as much as they should know based off of Tesla just, I guess, communicating their product like any other company would, let alone no one I know, regardless of their age, but especially my age demographic, trusts their product. When you couple that with brand tarnishment since 2021, I mean, listen, as a brand, we've at least been flat for the last 4 years, and we topped out in the latter part of 2021. This is,
okay,
there's data that shows.
let's. All right, I'm going to ask you for that data. Omar, go ahead.
Well, I'm 30 years old. I bought my first Tesla when I'm 25, and I think it's a very different story here in the West Coast. When I was 25 and I got a Tesla, very few people had it, but I mean, people just loved the cars when you took it into when you drove around in it, the acceleration, the sound system. People here are generally way, even like the little kids, like the ones in elementary school and middle school, they know so much about Tesla. They love Teslas. They want to come up and ride the Cybertruck. So very few people I knew had them. And, since then, as we've gotten into our 30s, pretty much everybody I know drives a Tesla now. So I think, maybe on the East Coast or something, there's a little bit of a different perception, maybe. Maybe if you're just sort of looking at the stock price and measuring sentiment that way, then you can say, oh, okay, this is very negative. But I definitely don't get the perception that, at least here, younger people don't trust the brand or don't like the brand. People here in California kind of see it as like an Apple-like brand.
I do live in New York City.
Yeah, you have to raise your hand and wait on mute, especially new speakers, regardless of their age group. Yoda?
Yeah, I think Yoda is old, and when I look at my kids, when they're in that age group, um, if they're gonna be Uber users today, they're gonna be RoboTaxi users tomorrow in a very near future. Now, for kids who are even younger, unfortunately, they won't even have to learn how to drive probably. So I think those are some of the implications where driving is going to be like riding horses for the younger generations. It would be a novelty to know how to ride a horse, but it's definitely not required. And I think the question that young people can ask themselves is, do they believe or don't believe that the future of driving is going to be autonomous? And if they are, they're likely going to be customers of Tesla and likely other brands as well out there.
Thank you, Yoda.
I guess I have 2 points to mention. One's an anecdote about a friend. He's very highly educated. Now he's in med school. He's a Trump supporter, and he's the one who said he put his Roth IRA all in Tesla, and like that was like surprising to me. So there are people out there that I think they try to describe themselves as rational, and when they view Tesla, I guess that's part of how they're perceiving the stock. And when Elon says, "Oh, we have the most superior product on the market," I think that's the appeal to sort of this rational perspective. There's this question about the liberal and the conservative tension. I think the other thing about that rational appeal is the safety aspect to it. That's not, the MSM really hates on Tesla for safety, and I think it's the most irrational thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, why would you not want the car that can drive itself or protect you when you're not paying attention? The way we're doing it sort of flipped. It's like the car is driving you, and then you pay, you intervene. Where I really find a lot of the value being when you're driving and you're not paying attention, the car is saving your butt. And so, it's a lot of it's perception, and that's why I'm so bullish on the marketing campaign and user education, because Tesla does require some changes in user behavior with FSD, and I think that RoboTaxi, that's really a really a litmus test for how you perceive how Tesla is progressing in this AI FSD race.
Okay. Matt. Sorry, Tesla Stan and then Matt.
Yeah. Hey, Emma. So I'm 31, right? I work at a tech company. I think most of the people.
Well, you're too old then. You're
too old, a
to
little bit
speak
too
for
old.
this.
Yeah, but I was just saying.
Matt, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. Like, I have teammates who are in that age group. I think even engineers. But I was thinking is a lot of the things that I like listen to when I ask them, like, okay, like, would you think of getting an EV? A lot of the same thing. Like, I don't know about like charging. I don't know. It's always the same thing, right? I mean, once there's a car that's like 25,000, right? If with the gas savings, you'll really be paying about $100 a month, right? I mean, so whether or not young people would use it is just a matter of cost function, right? I mean, like, okay, everything's cool and all, but if you're paying $100 a month, there's no denying whether you like EVs or not EVs. Like, a lot of people, like, that'll touch most people, right? The money, and that'll be most people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to, I mean, like, even these polls, it's hard to kind of parse the data so specifically because, obviously, as Omar mentioned earlier, younger folks tend to have less income than, people in their 30s and 40s. And, there's a high correlation between income level and willingness to try new technology. But, this may not even be relevant because, as Yoda pointed out, the future is going to be autonomous. So it's going to be about, do you want to ride on the RoboTaxi network or do you want to own your own vehicle? So interesting discussion. Matt, go ahead.
So speaking to the whole political demographic, so I live up in North Texas, in the Frisco area, so very conservative area. And I think two things, I'm a heavy Tesla user, I have multiple Tesla cars. I'm a heavy investor. I think the two or three things I really keep hearing from all my friends, and again, this is anecdotal, this is just obviously more my area, the people I hang out with, but one is it's families, right? They want to buy Escalades, they want to buy bigger SUVs, and they just say these things aren't big enough. Keep in mind that Frisco is heavily Tesla. I would count 1 out of 20 cars going down the road, Tesla Model Ys and 3s. So it's not like they're not adopting it. But I would say the other thing I constantly get, there's a car wash right down the road from me that I get my car washed every week. And every time I go, someone goes, "Oh my gosh, that Model X is amazing. What is it?" And they have no idea about AVs. They have no idea about the technology, what it does. And that to me is just, again, it's just, there's just so many people out there that regardless of what political affiliation they are, they just don't know. And it kind of shocks me, being the fact that they've been around for so long. So.
Thank you. Tesla Stan, did you have something to add there?
I mean, I guess the real question that I'm thinking about is, do you believe that EVs are the future or not, right? I mean, if you look at oil reserves, I think most people would be surprised to know, like, current reserves might last 20, 30 years. So so the question is, at some point in the future, gas is going to be way too expensive. So it's a no-brainer. Like in the limit, driving gas is just obsolete, right? And then the question is, how do we last from now till then? Because we all agree that like Tesla has the best products, right?
Yeah, thank you, Joseph.
I totally share the same sentiment with Matt. That's my Model X experience, and that's my experience, albeit anecdotal. I mean, you know, I just want us to kind of be honest in this group. I heard you before about you on like maybe I'm viewing it from a short term lens, but I just have a question. Like over the last 4 years, if we just look at the last 4 years, is Tesla's brand awareness? Is it more known, and is it more known in a positive way? Looking back 4 years ago to the date to now, that's all I have to ask.
Odd.
I think that given Tesla has been able to grow sales at 50% CAGR for the last 3 years, I think that obviously they had to increase their brand awareness. There's no other way that they could have increased sales, especially because one of the primary sales is online sales. And also, I believe that it was like a year ago, they actually surpassed Toyota in brand value. So I think that they definitely did increase their brand value over time and awareness.
Great. Edward, welcome.
Hello. So just wanted to point you out the JP Morgan Asset Management Energy Transition Report is from Michael Chambalest. It's published every year, and it's full of information about EV adoption. And one chart that is very interesting that I took from the 2022 edition, I posted here 23 minutes ago in the thread of the conversation. It shows you the EV registration by state in the United States, and California, of course, is the highest one. And then they found a way to calculate the super user share of state gasoline consumption. So in which state you can find the consumer that needs the highest amount of gasoline. And so you can see that in California, on average, there are much less, a number that is much inferior to Louisiana or Texas in terms of gasoline consumption. So this is in line with other reports from Norway, which they say that EV are bought by everyone, mostly wealthy families, but they tend to have multiple cars and to use EV for short-term trips, and for longer trips they still use gasoline. So it's not gasoline yes, EV yes, or it's not black and white. It's much more complex and depends on the needs of the single consumer. So I would approach the topic in a more detailed way, and the JP Morgan report is really well balanced and looks at every perspective. So, and also to the guy that was saying that gasoline will be expensive in 20 years, I don't know if he knows, but batteries and solar PV comes from China, and China energy consumption is 60% coal. So it's not that we are going to produce batteries and solar PV with I don't know, with green energy. We still need fossil for at least 20, 30 years. So we will find.
Okay, thank you, Edward. All right. Can you mute yourself? There you go. Thank you. Let's see, I'm trying to bring up a new speaker. Lots of bugs today, even more so than usual. And in the meantime, thank you very much for Niranga Sumana Pileke for signing up for Patreon. Someone's going to sign up one of these days with Ligma, and then another person's going to sign up with Johnson, and I'm going to say it live on YouTube. It's not going to be good. Matt, go ahead.
So, a kind of question to Omar is, isn't there just natural sales cycles that happen periodically? Because you might have a vast majority of people that have a fairly new car within a certain time frame that just aren't looking to buy. And I know that chart before you were showing, are they going to buy or whatnot? But it seems like there's still probably a lot of buyers out there that want to buy it regardless of political affiliation. But hey, my car's 2 years old, or I just bought a gas car, right? What is what does those sales cycles look like over the period of like a 1 to 5 year cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, obviously. There's a lot of moving parts. There's macro, there's consumer sentiment. But, it's kind of a big lifestyle change to switch to an EV. It's very difficult to convince somebody to pay more than maybe an alternative and tell them, okay, well, maybe it'll have a lower operating cost over the lifetime. And you have to get a charger, you have to change the way you drive, make trips. I mean, people just have a lot of inertia. They don't want to spend time doing things and making a switch unless there's a huge benefit to them. It has to actually make their experience 10 times better. Even 2 times or 5 times isn't better for them to consider, I think, making that lifestyle change.
Yoda. Man, I really love this space so much that I say, we haven't had, people speaking from that demographic, and all of a sudden we have 5, 6 people from that age group up on the speaker board within like seconds. It's amazing.
I think another thing I would really encourage the younger demographic is uh, take the time to try and go to a Tesla dealership with your parents, or if you're of age, go there yourself directly and ask to try FSD 12.3 or 12.4, I guess coming soon, or bug your parents' friend who has one. And what would be great is if you can experience that and project what the future might be. And if you see that the future includes these type of technologies, including Tesla providing RoboTaxi services, where you and your friends are gonna, ride to school, to work, then work your ass off and try to take some of that income and invest in that future. Again, whether it's Tesla or other service providers, that would be probably a very wise thing to do to take advantage of your runway.
It's great advice, Omar.
Yeah, it's an interesting tension because, younger buyers in the 20 to 30 demographic, they're more tech forward. They're more likely to make a change. They're more likely to learn something new compared to a guy who's 70 years old. So they are more willing to embrace new technology. Yet on the other hand, when you think about what your living situation's like, usually in your 20s to 30s, you're typically moving around a lot. You're not really in a permanent place. You don't own your own home. It's, extremely rare. You may be going to college and renting something while you're in college and then moving around a lot. You probably don't have a lot of spare cash because you may be going to school rather than getting a job. So you do have that sort of tech forward consumer, but they're living situation and their financial situation isn't necessarily conducive to setting up an EV. They don't necessarily have a garage where they can install a charger. So maybe there are some things that could be done to reach to that demographic, especially now that the affordability has improved substantially. Still not, super affordable for someone in that demographic, but maybe, there could be some things to help explain to, for example, students how they would charge it and use it in their day-to-day life.
Uziobi and that Tesla stand.
I absolutely agree. I just graduated from college, so I mean, my school went to Columbia, so it was particularly academically focused. But at the same time, like no one was going out of their. It was a city, so no one's going out of their way to get a car. Um, uh, and meanwhile, though, other students do have to get cars for college, and I think some hand holding would go a long way, because these are people that don't have that much money. Financing sort of uncomfortable, and it sort of makes you anxious. You don't want to be in debt when you're 20. So, hand holding and education, especially for students that are just learning, I mean, they're there with their professors all the time, and their only motive is, to get more knowledge, not to make money. So, as you graduate from college, becoming working more, your perception of life changes too, and you're not going. You realize like you need to live your life. Like, it's not just you're on this island for 4 years, so they're in a bubble. That's like a big thing, and some students actually need cars for it. Some, like I, didn't need one at all.
When I was a freshman in college, I had a Toyota Corolla that I had leased and then we gave it back. And so I went to college and I missed having a car so much. My parents told me I didn't need one, that I went and bought a $10,000 Chevy Oveo, which was like this really tiny sedan, in cash, and didn't tell my parents. And then they were really upset when they found out I bought this car. But like that's the kind of car you're buying in college, like some cheap $10,000 piece of shit.
Tesla.
Yeah, I was thinking about two other things. I read like a report saying car repairs costs has gone up 10%, and it seems to keep going up, right? And at some point, like a gas car has thousands of parts. Maintenance is just going to be more expensive at some point, right? Like to the point where it's just going to be an increasingly big part of cost of ownership. And also, I was thinking about just like on another topic, like if all the companies are moving towards hybrids, I mean, those are future EV buyers, right? I mean, if like on a, say for example, on a plug-in hybrid, like what's your battery? like 7 kWh maybe, like not a huge battery capacity. And I read something interesting. Someone was saying like that for you to drive on electric, like that 30 miles that you get from that small battery, you have to keep charging it all the time to get that benefit. So, someone mentioned that they went from a hybrid to an EV, like they would maybe charge it every day, but now they're maybe charging once a week, you know? Um, like at
Yep.
some point, like the transition will happen, but maybe not as fast as we had hoped in the past, right? I think that's one thing. And then also, if Tesla starts getting like a RoboTaxi, I mean, at that point, it's just everyone who's driving Uber, right, and or taking rideshare at some point in the future, like it's just gonna, butts and seats. Like people are gonna drive in it, people are gonna experience it, and that's the only way to change things at this point.
That's great. That's great. Let's turn a little bit, kind of use that. That's a good tangent as a stand to FSD robotaxis. We obviously have 12.4 coming out now,
No.
rolling out to
It sounds like it's a
employees. So go ahead, sir.
12.3.4.
Okay, sorry, 12.3 more. And we also have an interesting edge case. Trying to find it in my mentions here. with trash cans. Did you see that one, Omar?
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. What'd you think of it? Surrounded by trash cans. I think we have, let's see, Selena in here too. So she was the one who posted it. If she wants to come up and talk about it, maybe give us some more detail behind the scenes. I pinned the post at the top of her screens. This post blew up, more than 100,000 views, 35 bookmarks, Selena. People love your trash cans. Selena, you're on mute.
Hey there. Yeah, it's funny how many people thought it was fake or photoshopped and I thought about that, but I didn't want to raise the camera and catch the neighbor's license plates in there. So no, it's real. It's fun. It was just amusing. I mean, little things like this happen and it's kind of part of the fun. The fun of the car. It's always upgrading and adapting and figuring things out and giving us a little laugh.
Yeah, Sammy, welcome. How are you? Sammy, can you guys see Sammy as a speaker? Okay, Sammy, you're on mute. Well, in the meantime, Omar, what do you think of this edge case? Do you think Elon is creating an army of trash cans?
Well, it's possible. Anything's possible.
That's an interesting one. Sammy, go ahead. Sammy, you're on mute.
Hey, yeah, I was having connection issues, but it just worked out. I have a question for Omar. I put down a deposit for the long range Model 3 the day that it came out. It's since had two minor price increases. I still do not have a VIN. I guess it's because of the white interior.
White interior? White interior?
Yeah. Yep. At this point, do I just
They're
wait for the
having a problem
ludicrous?
with the.
Just wait for the performance for?
I mean, you can always cancel it if the ludicrous comes out, but my understanding is they had some problem with the supplier for the white interiors. There was some issue with the part, and they should be getting a fixed part in this quarter. So we'll see more, white Model 3s. So that's been delaying a lot of people with white interior.
What do you expect the price of the performance version to be?
Similar to the previous price of the Model 3 Performance.
Machine is trying to come up, but having connection issues. Let's see. Need to move down a couple of folks. Selena, how is FS2 doing for you in general?
I really love it. It's going to be hard at the end of the month to not have it. It just the cost. I'm in Canada, so hopefully they come out with the subscription here. That would be nice to see. I would definitely be on board with that.
They say they'll have it out before the trial's over.
Nice.
So you're going to subscribe, or you don't think it's worth it? You can be honest. We won't be offended.
I would probably subscribe at times that I think I would use it the most. I mean, for my, daily driving, it's maybe not worth it, but there'd be times, summer road trips where it's definitely worth it. And I mean, it's it's impressive. It's not perfect for sure, but I mean, it's only going to get better. So yeah, I would definitely be on board.
That's great. When machine figures out how the space works, we can talk some macro maybe, but all right. Todd?
Yeah, what was the price of the previous Model 3 Performance? Because I know that the other versions don't apply for the tax credit, but if it comes under 55,000, they could have it qualify for tax credit, or they can make it cost under 55,000 and then include a performance package so that because those software upgrades don't apply
I
towards
don't see. I mean, I don't think Model 3. I think Model 3 Performance is going to be incredible to drive. Maybe even Machine will buy it at some point. He might get hardware 4 with it. You know, I know his wife wants a Model 3, so maybe that'll be the one he wants. He gets. He certainly has the money for it. I mean, double income engineers in the best area of California, right, Machine? But
Um,
but you're cheap. You go to Popeyes
well,
for chicken.
it's just close. And, you know,
Yeah. But having said that, I don't think Model 3 Performance is going to be material for Tesla's financial statements, for your question. So, Machine, what do you think about this trash can problem? These trash cans are everywhere, man. We're just seeing trash cans that don't exist. That's probably why when you were in that car with Omar and Meta.
I'm not aware of this. There's a trash can. I'm seeing this. Okay, header. Like I've been out of the loop. Oh my god. I think they're going to need to retrain their model.
How can this even happen? Like, how are they seeing trash cans when they don't exist? Is this what Meta means by emergent behavior?
Well, I'm not. You know, everything's speculation here. I'm not going to act as confident as Meta, but keep in mind the visualization stack is not something that was built originally for V12, which is end to end, right? So end to end doesn't have explicit direct knowledge of what you want to visualize, right? If they just train something end to end, they wouldn't necessarily have a layer to extract that would be for visualization. They had to either train on the visualization that was coming out of V11 as a layer output on V12 so that it kind of matches V11. Do something like that to learn representation to show people. And so maybe there's some hiccups there where I don't know. I don't know. Is there a picture here showing what actually is around? Is there some objects?
Well, we have the person who posted it in the space if she wants to come up and answer your questions.
So I presume there's something there, and it's just getting a classification wrong on what that object is. Hilariously slow in this case. It doesn't, by itself doesn't mean the car can't drive or figure out, but it's pretty funny. But this is the least of Tesla's worries.
Okay, so what is our biggest worry?
Well, first of all, I was told that unfortunately there was a person from Columbia University here, which is very, very bad school, and probably giving you wrong advice. I think actually they changed their name to the University of Palestine, so I don't think they're in the Ivy Leagues anymore. But then aside from that, the main issue is the used car list prices for Tesla continue to go down, albeit at a slower rate, while the used car index is going up due to seasonality. So the gap between Model 3 price and the used car index is increasing, with the Model 3 now being more than $1,200 cheaper on average than a used car, index value. And that's pretty surprising. It's not slowing down yet. The gap is getting bigger. And this is just further going to put pressure on margins, say average selling price for Teslas. This is not just Model 3. The Model Y follows the exact same trajectory, at a higher level. So, we've been tracking this for over a year and a half. waiting for it to stop, waiting for the bleeding to stop. Blood.
Hold on. Okay. Let me ask something. First of all, you're mentioning Model 3. We also talked about Model Y in here. We had an account answer dozens of questions. Cheap Teslas. He's now on X, and he's posting daily his cheapest Teslas that he can find, whether he gets it from trade-ins, on auctions, etc. Seems like a good guy. I don't know anything about him. I just met him a couple days ago. So in here, but it's also Model Y. I mean, you can't get. I mean, he was selling a Model Y with FSD, and Model Ys are only newer model because they only got volume production in the last couple of years here, unlike Model 3 that got the volume production back in 2018. So they can be up to 5-6 years old now. And Model Ys, however, are 2-3 years old. So the one that he was selling was only 3 years old with FSD, and he was selling for less than $25,000. So clearly, all Model 3s and Model Y used prices are declining at a pretty rapid pace. But at the same time, Machine, your source is Car Gurus, which lists asking prices from dealerships, right? And there's no adjustment made to those. It's an average of whatever the average they have over there. There's no adjustment for mix or seasonality or anything. And clearly, Tesla's fleet is getting older, right? I mean, this is also true for others, but Tesla's fleet's getting older at a much faster rate because it's a smaller fleet, it's a relatively newer fleet, etc. So how do you adjust for those when you're looking at those numbers?
You bring up a good point. I actually don't think it's about it getting older. It's more about percentage-wise. Teslas have more cars that are newer as a percentage of the fleet than legacy OEMs. And if you applied a weighting for each vehicle based on how new it is, as you know, a car right off the lot has the fastest rate of depreciation, right? That slope is the steepest when a car is brand new right off the lot. And then every subsequent year, that slope gets less. So if you're a car company like Tesla who is ramping up production, and that means during that ramp up period, it's always you have a predominant number of new cars, then your slope on average is going to be bigger than other OEMs. So you would have to weight that. So that's a great point. And you would expect then Teslas to maybe have something that's perceived to look like a worse slope than it actually is, right? So I've thought about that. I think the problem is that if you actually go and look at specific year models for Tesla and try to control for that newness, you can go look at a Toyota RAV4 2022 model and a Tesla Model Y 2022 model to control for that newness factor, and you still get similar trends. So I don't think that fully accounts for all the issues you mentioned, but I do think it accounts somewhat for the biggest ones. And yeah, there's issues with list prices versus actual purchase price, and dealers, who knows what they're manipulating. But I think those things would are like shorter term noise that would ultimately show up one way or other after like a year and a half, which is what we're seeing here. And it's the data's not that noisy. It could obviously be biased slightly for Tesla versus other OEMs, but I think the trend itself is probably correct.
Okay, and what do you think this means for Tesla's prices? Do you expect this trend to continue? No, I'm going to skip that question. The answer is so easy. You deserve difficult questions. Where do you think the inflation is going to be next month?
Well, I mean, I haven't looked at the.
Let's pivot to macroeconomics. Let's pivot to macroeconomics a little bit while you're on here.
I haven't looked at
So macro is not Matt's or Fudd's strength, therefore, or expertise area. Therefore, we're going to move them down. I believe Mike is in the audience. If you would like to come up as a speaker, who's welcome to talk about some of these recent data that we got this morning that is concerning to some market participants. Stocks are down quite a bit. Is Mike in here? I don't see him. He was here earlier. Anyway, well, let's just talk between you and I. Are you ready? You excited for this?
I mean, not really, but sure, we can do it for a little bit. And then I got to eat.
Oh, there he is. All right. So what did you think of today's inflation data?
I haven't broken it down probably as much as you have. Like I know there's been notes on the housing component still being high. I think I've seen some plots from other people about rents going up, and every time I go look at like Trueflation to break down the subcategories, I really feel like most things are definitely under control. There's just a few categories like service and housing, which still have inflation. And so, when you measure things in aggregate, obviously sometimes they try to throw out categories.
All right. Well, let me. So clearly you haven't looked at the data.
Correct. So
because you're just BSing with general stuff. So let me just kind of guide you a little bit. So I pinned at the top a quick summary of the last few days' data from macro analyst. Thank you, macro analyst, for co-hosting. I appreciate it. All right. And in this, you can see in this graphic that macro analyst was so generous to share, even though it's paywalled usually. Services X shelter, 3-month annualized. This is the data point that's given most kind of stomach ache, stomach burn, heartburn to people. Services X shelter, 3-month annualized was 8.7%. And it's trending up. And, in part, it's driven by auto insurance jumping 22%. Today's inflation data has caused yield curve to jump up 20 basis points now. A 10-year yield is up to 4.56. A 5-year treasury yield is up 24 basis points to 4.62. Okay. And it's really the 5-year yield that influences all the loan rates. So this has specific implications for Tesla's order growth in the coming months, quarters, etc. We've been talking about this in this space. And we have Mike on the speaker board. Mike does a good job keeping up with the data, unlike Machine. Mike, what do you think?
So Fed Chair Powell, he often points to core services X housing inflation, core services X housing. Month over month, that was, in this most recent report, it was up 0.44% month over month, and annualized, that's about 5.3%. That's been rising the last few months. I think the tailwinds that we had from housing, kind of lapping the peaks of the summer of 2022, that's kind of behind us. So what's driving, in my opinion, this pickup in core services X housing inflation, it's wages. Wage growth is really what's causing this, and mostly in services inflation, not goods inflation. And that's difficult. That inertia of wage inflation, that's difficult to stop frankly, without a recession. And I don't think a recession is in the cards, and that's due to the close to $2 trillion fiscal deficit. Very difficult. Historically, running an 8% to GDP deficit, very difficult. There's so much money coming into the system. It's very difficult to get a recession with that size of a deficit. So the Fed is kind of in a pickle here because the tailwinds lapping those year-over-year peaks of housing and rents from the summer of 2022. That's in the rearview mirror. So Yeah, I think market expects only 2 rate cuts. It's complicated by the election in November. So, perhaps I'm guessing we have no cuts to interest rates, but I do not think it's going to have any negative impact on the economy. I think the risk of recession is quite low, and it's because aggregate incomes are going up, wages are going up, employment is full, and there's a lot of fiscal stimulus. So I don't think it matters. Fed funds does not matter. What does matter is the 10-year yield. And, Yaman, you pointed out that it's 4.56%. If we get close to 5%, like we saw in October, there could be some pressure on asset markets. And, the U.S. economy is very financially driven. The percentage of the value of assets within the economy is such a large percentage relative to national incomes that there's this pro-cyclical effect on the economy from asset values. So if the 10-year goes to 5%, I think that would pressure stock market values, and that could pressure downwards economic activity. But without the 10-year going up to 5%, I don't think there's any risk of recession.
You'd see. Thank you, Mike.
I was hoping Machine was still here. I had something to tell him. I wanted to tell him that, like his mom, CPI was hotter than expected today.
All right. In the meantime, thank you, Yutsi. Stay up here for a second. We have Melanie here too. I'm trying to get Machine back as well. We have YouTube Live now working. YouTube Live now working. You may head over there if you prefer that. Earlier, there were some issues with going live on YouTube. Mike, thank you very much for all that overview. Yutsi, what was your take on the data services CPI X housing, X shelter had, a surge really, and it's not just one item, although it is led by auto insurance rates, which obviously has implications for Tesla as well. And you and I have a coffee bet that the 10-year yield will hit 5% before 3%. And you made that bet when it was about 4%. So now it's actually above 4.5. So you're more likely to win that bet today than it appears I am. And so that would be wild for the markets, I think, and also for capital goods purchases, for housing, for cars. We already have auto days of supply rising above normal levels. Housing inventory is rising sooner than seasonally normal. And that, I think that could be bad for, yesterday, as, I explained to my value patrons that NFIB, Small Business Survey data, shows deteriorating hiring plans almost actually clearly in the recession territory too. So small businesses are not doing too hot right now. What do you think, Yutsi?
Since it is Tesla space, I'm going to kind of tie this in with Tesla as well. The one thing that stuck out to me was the auto insurance side of things, and we saw from a regulatory filing, I think it was, that Tesla didn't necessarily generate much money on their insurance division, which is not necessarily a bad thing. They're using it to collect data, make the cars safer. There's a lot of positives from that, but I think we're maybe seeing in the last few months why the business was maybe struggling. Although Teslas are safe vehicles, they have all these active safety features and things like that. When they do eventually, or if they get in accidents with traditional ICE cars, I think the cost to repair those vehicles has gotten so expensive recently that that's what we've seen some of the surge in the insurance side of the business. So I think costs on insurance companies are kind of playing catch up, and that's why we're seeing the huge rise of premiums. So that was maybe the one thing that stuck out with me. I think everybody that has renewed their insurance in the last 6 months has kind of been a little sticker shocked.
Thank you. Meta, what do you think? Or would you like to talk about something else, which is totally fine. If you want to talk about FSD, or if you want to talk about the intersection of these inflation, interest rates, and orders for Tesla. Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was actually curious about where you guys think the bottom is for Model 3 used car pricing, given macro effects.
I think that depends on the timeline for FSD getting really, really good. In my mind, that's the primary
Let, let's
factor here.
ignore
We don't
let's
really
ignore
know.
FSD for now.
I would say it depends on your view of macro. And although we have all these coffee bets, neither me nor Yaman has any idea what's going to happen. I feel like if there's a
Speak for yourself, sir.
excuse me,
Speak for
sir.
yourself.
If you believe that there's a recession coming, usually a recession leads to declining prices of all goods, not just vehicles. So if you think there's a recession on a potential on the horizon, I would think they would come down. But if you think that the economy continues to hold up and we have a soft landing and things like that, and kind of let's say inflation moderates over the next few months, although we've had some spikes, if you think about it, some of the insurance spikes that we're seeing should be, you would think would be late cycle things. So the cost of vehicles spiked, the cost of labor to repair those vehicles spiked, all that stuff has spiked a while ago, and now it's finally insurance companies are realizing that the premiums that they're charging drivers isn't enough to cover those increased costs. So there is an argument to be made that although insurance prices are going up, that's kind of a late cycle thing. So if you think that we're kind of towards the end of the inflation narrative, then I would think that Tesla vehicles are getting probably pretty close to bottoming out as far as the used vehicle side of things.
Isn't there a intrinsic value to just like the metal in the car at some point where like the cars maybe don't go below like I think the batteries in the car alone are worth at least 5,000, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at some websites that post like salvage. So if you like look at salvage vehicle worth, but that's like still significantly lower than what they are now. I don't think salvage Teslas sell for more than like 15,000 or 10,000. But yeah, I guess theoretically there is a floor.
I mean, Meta, you think people are going to be able to buy, $10,000 used Model 3s before FSD gets so good that it starts impacting, used values for Tesla?
I think even if FSD gets really, really good, the people who are buying a car for $10,000 or 15,000 or $20,000, they're probably really price sensitive, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think the value of a really good driver, where you kind of focus on other things, it doesn't nag you, gives back you an hour of your time a day, is worth more than $200 a month. Like I think a lot of people will choose that. People pay how much for Amazon Prime, you know, and yeah, we should probably look that up. I'm gonna look that up while YouTube speaks.
If you look at used car gurus data, at least in the last 30 days or so, it does appear that Tesla's um, used car prices are kind of starting to bottom out, and Tesla's kind of taking the stance that it doesn't really look like they're going to cut new prices anymore. So I think there is a little bit of incentive that the prices are probably going to stay somewhat close to where they're at.
Well, we don't know if Tesla's going to cut new prices or not. I mean, the data that Machine is talking about is pretty strong, first of all. And then secondly, 230 million people worldwide use Amazon Prime. And obviously it's a much lower payment for monthly. It's only $15, depending on your plan or whatever. But the thing is if people see the value, then they'll pay. If it saves you $100 plus $200 on your insurance payment, why wouldn't you sign up for FSD? Right? If Tesla perfects FSD and they can take on insurance risk as they drive you around, and it saves their insurance monthly payment $100 to $200 depending on whatever you're paying today, and it gives back an hour of your time a day. Why would someone buy a freaking Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic when they can ride have the Model 3 drive them around. Meta and then you see.
So Amazon charges $200 uh, a year. So it's not like
That's not that. Again, the point is more like if people see the value, they'll pay for something. Okay. And what are your thoughts on this saving on insurance payment?
I just want to make a point on the subscription price first, but we can switch if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just looked it up. Like diapers, a diaper subscription costs you about $100 a month. So I do think it's mispriced at $200 a month because it's 10x the price of Amazon Prime. So it's not that it has to deliver value; it has to provide 10 times the value that Amazon Prime provides people, and twice the value that changing diapers for a child and having the diapers, well, obviously doesn't change the diapers for you, but having those diapers arrive on a subscription provides to people. So I think there's like there is a value gap there. And no matter how good something is, if you're poor, you can't afford it, right? Like many people would probably love to be on a yacht. Doesn't matter how good of a value that is. You may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, maybe Optimus will change some diapers in the future. You'd see.
That's a good segue. Can I talk about my wife's experience with FSD this week?
Sure. But first of all, what do you think about the pricing of FSD? $199 a month.
Also,
Do you
why did
think?
diapers make you think that was a good segue?
Yeah, I don't know.
My,
I don't know.
my wife's pregnant. Also a good segue.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's great.
congratulations. There was a big missing part there. I was like,
Yeah.
diapers, like what?
No, okay. I'm just gonna go in. The, um, my wife has and myself. I haven't the last. I've never experienced FSD beta, the newest stuff, until this week. I'd done like the old autopilot in 2016, 2017, when it first came out, and then I had a drive maybe 2 years ago with like the original FSD beta, but I hadn't had a ride in a long time, and so I rented uh, a Model S because it had the newest 12.3.3, and I took my wife along with it, and I wanted to get her thoughts too because she's like, I don't know, just your average American person here in the Midwest, and we drove around on it for maybe an hour, and it probably had 4 or 5 disengagements, I'd say, over the course of maybe 45 minutes of driving or so. And at the end of the drive, she didn't know how much the vehicle cost. She didn't know how much FSD cost, any of that stuff. And I asked her, I was like, okay, you saw some of the benefits. We drove on the highway. It was great with lane keeping and automatic uh, lane changing and all that stuff. It saw the stoplights. So some of that stuff she was super impressed with, but some of the acceleration was a little bit jerky. There's a couple right turn on reds that was not necessarily a great smooth experience, and I asked her how much she'd pay for it, and she said she'd pay maybe a few $1,000s for it, and I was like, "Okay, what about, like, on a monthly basis if you just subscribed, like, a subscription?" She said, "I don't know, maybe $30 or $40 a month."
Yeah, I think even if you got over $20 a month, you're now in the like premium subscriptions. Like I think the most expensive subscriptions out there are still TV packages in the hundreds, but I can't really think of many subscriptions that are $200 a month.
All right. So what do you think? Do you think they should drop it?
Yeah, I really do. Like I think there was a period in my life where I took Ubers all the time, and uh, my monthly spend barely ever went over $300. So I think for the average family, $200 on effectively paying for taxis a month, it's challenging. I think if they made it into like a family plan and you paid $200 and you got like 3 or 4 cars, that could be another way to go. But they've effectively got to drop the price, I think. I think it's just the reality of the recessionary times that we're in. Raise the prices later as people like, Amazon started off at like what, $70 a month, and then they raised the prices over time. Tesla should do the same. Maybe when it is earning income, that's when you raise the prices, right? You could say, you get this a certain amount of time, maybe you get a certain number of trips. They could put some kind of caps on there just to like prevent
Okay.
you from using it for profit.
Yep. All right. Earlier, we talked about Gallup data about intention to buy. I'm not going to cover that. I think we did a pretty good job there. We had a number of people from younger demographics come up and speak about their experiences, what they're hearing from their friends, networks. You're welcome to listen to that section, um, either on YouTube. You can go back actually now while we're live or later. We have Mike and Yutzi on the call on the speaker board. So maybe we should focus a little bit. I mean, it is a big macro day today. These price actions are driven very much by macro today. Tesla down 3.2%, PE ratio of 39.8, market cap is $537 billion. Nvidia stock was down quite a bit in the morning, but now it's up 1.8%. SMCI, Supermicro, is also break even. I think these chip stocks have peaked and they're going to go down from here on out. But Meta, as a Tesla investor, are you concerned that the Fed may not cut until September or November?
Yeah, it's starting to seem possible. I think as a Tesla investor, if inflation is driven by oil prices, it's not as big of a concern. But if inflation stays stagnant and it's not due to oil, it's due to everything else, I think it's a different story.
Yeah, oil prices have risen a little bit, but they're not at levels where they're going to make headlines, like all-time highs kind of headlines, But these inflation numbers are driven mostly by services X shelter. So the market is starting to believe maybe it's a little more stickier than we originally thought. And the Reuters headline today is Wall Street slides as inflation stalls, rate cut hopes wane. And the yield curve is up 20-25 basis points in the section of the curve that matters to Tesla investors, 5 to 10 year treasury yield. Those are the rates, obviously, that impact all the loan rates. This also kind of calls, just a warning to people asking for Tesla to offer subvented interest rates to drive orders in the shorter term. Had Tesla done that in the last year or two to a great extent, as others have, like Ford, GM, etc., they would be in a worse position today because these interest rates are proven to be higher for longer. So whichever automaker offered those lower subvented 0%, 1%, 2% loan rates to potential buyers are going to have to pay the difference between those loan rates and the market rate, which is 10% for longer than they may have originally thought. So that's a big risk for their balance sheets, income statements, etc. And maybe Mike can talk to that a little bit. Mike, where do you stand on Tesla offering? People are calling for Tesla to offer lower loan rates. Where do you think? Where do you stand on that issue?
No opinion, Yaman.
Interesting. Sounds like you're busy. Meta, what do you think?
I don't really understand this and how it affects or how it all connects together, so I'm gonna opt out. Could I ask a question instead?
Sure.
If nothing changes, does inflation naturally regress, or do you think we just stay where we are? Because it feels like the Fed's adjusting of the interest rates is not having the desired effect in the timeline they want. So do they have to ratchet up the interest rate, or could they just wait?
They would have to up the interest rate. If inflation turns upward, if inflation rates turn upward and then people start worrying about a wage price spiral, So I saw a couple of folks that I follow via macro analyst account talk about a wage price spiral again. So if that happens, then maybe Larry Summers might be right that the next action might be a hike. It's unlikely. It's definitely not being priced in the stock market, but just the fact that we're hearing a bit more rumble around wage price spiral when we thought it was behind us is a little concerning. Yeah. Yeah. But on the other hand, another account I follow through macro analyst, his name is Peter Berezin, who is the Chief Global Strategist and Director of Research at BCA Research, okay, independent research firm, formerly with Goldman Sachs and IMF. He says, contrarian take, I'll pin this at the top. Actually, never mind. Contrarian take, the current inflation scare will fizzle out because unlike 2021, wage growth is falling. There can't be a wage price spiral unless wages are spiraling. Here at the top of the screens. Okay, it has a graph as well from BCA Research. It shows a 3-month moving average of median wage growth, hourly data, unweighted series. Okay, shown advanced by 8 months and as a 3-month moving average. Source is Indeed. So this is Indeed data. So according to Indeed data, Peter Berezin is assuming that Indeed data will, and so those are posted wages, will precede wage growth by 8 months. Okay, I'm not sure what kind of research he has to support that claim. He's only showing 5 years of data, so that's clearly not enough to conclude that there's any sort of a relationship. But it does kind of make sense on the surface that the posted wages, just like asking prices for houses or cars, I guess these are asking prices for labor, would precede actual. And that is showing wage disinflation continuing throughout the year. So Peter's concluding that he does not see a wage price spiral. Meta?
So I get the concept of a wage price spiral, but conceptually, have we ever seen this in history in the United States?
Yeah, in the 70s, right?
Okay, and how long did that last?
Well, the up and down period was, Mike would know this better, but, about a decade. And then they had to jack up the interest rates by a lot.
Got it.
But
Okay.
Mike, do you expect that to happen?
No, very different today. Back in the 70s through the early 80s, inflation was a result of, for the most part, excess deficit spending. Similar to today, interest rates are really complicated. Short-term interest rates are very complicated. On one hand, higher overnight rates actually increases the money supply, increases national income. If you have savings, those savings return a higher yield. Okay, so that's inflationary. Higher interest rates are actually inflationary as it relates to increased national income on savings. The savings is think of it as an absolute amount of wealth that's increasing the money supply. That's inflationary. So it's more complicated than it appears. if you have inflation, increase the cost of capital, which then pressures the yield curve, which makes longer term interest rates higher due to the opportunity cost of short term interest rates being higher. It's not that simple, especially today where we have massive deficits. The same thing happened in the late 70s and early 1980s. Fed funds overnight rates were as high as 18%, and inflation was still a problem, and it was because of the massive fiscal deficits. And that's, in my opinion, my strong opinion, inflation today is a result of these massive deficits. And it's not going to be cured by increasing the cost of capital overnight, riskless cost of capital, as proxied by Fed funds. Only to the extent that you bring them high enough such that it brings out sellers in the long end of the curve, forcing up long-term interest rates. Long-term interest rates are really the interest rates that impact the real economy through mortgage financing, automobile financing, durable goods financing, is about long-term interest rates.
Right. What I really love about YouTube Live is that people are having conversations about FSD over there while we talk about macro. So there are two different conversations going on. Omar, do you have anything to add to what Mike said, I said, Meta said about interest rates, inflation, potential wage price spiral, or Peter's data showing Indeed data predicting wage disinflation for the rest of the year?
Well, I think that I'm not sure if we're going to see a wage price spiral. I think the economy is still a little bit weak, but the rise in fuel prices is a little bit concerning. We're not seeing CPI come down, but at the same time, people's expectations keep moving back and forth all the time. First, we thought that we're in some hyperinflation scenario. Then we said, oh, there's no hyperinflation. It's actually a soft landing. Then we said, okay, maybe it's not such a soft landing. CPI is coming down, not as much as we thought. Who knows what we're going to think tomorrow? I don't know. I think overall, things will be okay. It is going to take a while to get down to the 2% target, but the Fed has also said that they don't need to see it hit 2%, they just need to see sustained progress. Now, if it's going in the other direction, that's obviously not sustained progress. So it's looking like the rate cuts that we were expecting and hoping for and desperately needing for Tesla as a business are going to be pushed out. So that's going to make the operating environment more challenging. And again, who knows what happens tomorrow? Maybe, something happens and there's sort of massive deflation, but it seems like it's just going to be a little bit of a struggle getting down from 3 point something to 2 point something.
Thank you. Man, today's space is a downer. What is going on here? And FUD is not even on the speaker board. How do we clear this up? Well, I mean, I think we should also mention, I think there's an asterisk for Tesla stock specifically. I think the other automakers are going to really hurt from rates staying higher for longer. Okay. But Tesla has a couple of things that are going right for Tesla investors. A lot of people are focused on FSD 12. I personally don't expect FSD 12 to impact Tesla's financial statements materially until 2025, 2026. But this year, we have Tesla Energy growing. Tesla's Lathrop factory is ramping. We've all seen megapacks coming out at a faster rate, accumulating in the lots over there. That doesn't necessarily mean they're installing newer lines or anything like that, but at a minimum, Tesla Energy is progressing on ramping its first production line and potentially optimizing it. So when the financial statements come out in a couple of weeks, in a few days here, I think that we're going to see a higher gross margin for Tesla Energy. And I don't think you need much operating expenses to install these things, sell these things. There's not much R&D going on. So that increased gross profit should drop down to operating profit and then down to the net income. So Tesla, unlike GM, Ford, BMW, Mercedes, Toyota, etc., has this aspect of Tesla Energy that I think will kind of carry Tesla stock through a potential downturn. Omar, what do you think about that?
Well, I hope so.
All right.
I mean, like my perspective as an investor is kind of like we have sort of a secular technology trend here with AI and with EVs to a lesser extent. Less secular in that it does seem to be getting impacted a little bit by the economy. But, there's always going to be something bad happening in the world. There's always going to be a headwind here or there. But, I mean, this is really, obviously, I think, a turning point in the business. They're kind of turning a corner. I think they're overtaking Waymo. Things may get more challenging from here, but I think what they have is just huge and transcends what's happening in the economy.
Okay. Okay. Meta, what do you think about that? Tesla Energy.
I mean, I think right now there's a lot of positives in the fundamentals, but the macros are kind of driving the market right now. So I don't think no matter how good Tesla Energy or Optimus or other things, or even FSD are doing, I'm not sure if those alone will change the narrative for Tesla. But of course, with Nvidia and other stocks, it has worked. I'm personally not convinced that Tesla gets away from the macro story right now. Maybe I'm just in a depressed mood.
You guys are all depressed today. You're bringing me down.
I'm not
Let,
surprised.
let me
I
ask.
mean,
Let me ask.
12.4 is rolling out to employees. That's pretty
12.3
exciting.
point. I made the same mistake. 12.3.4. But before we switch to FSD, Meta, what do you think will be the lowest the stock? No, you're not. Is machine here? Let's see. Mike is also M. No, he's not here today. He's not here right now. What do you guys think the lowest price that the stock price sees this year?
Probably what we already saw, 105.
Omar, what do you think? Would you like to put in a prediction, or Mike? We didn't
I mean,
see
I have no
105 today. What are you
idea.
talking about? That Bradford is. Maybe he can tell us about it. But the lowest that we saw in 2024 is 162. The
I think
105
we
you're
got to like
referring.
113 last year, maybe. But I don't know what the stock price is going to be. Nobody
Yeah,
can
that was
predict the
end of
future.
22. That was end of 2022. We got close to 100. But in the last year, the lowest that we've seen is what we just saw is 163, 162. People forget time flies, guys. Time flies. That was end of 2022. This space has been going on for nearly 2 years now. How do you feel about that?
I feel like this space ends at times. So I don't know if it's been going on for 2 years straight.
So you think So you think Meta, we've seen the bottom in the stock, 162? Meta, क्या catch your tongue?
Oh, I talked the whole time while I was on mute.
Mhm.
I have to run here in a second, but I think 130, 140 is certainly possible. I'm not expecting that or hoping for that, but I think people should definitely be prepared for the worst case. Don't like over leverage or anything.
Okay. He says 130 to 140. All right. Before you go, any takes on FSD 12.3.4? There's a lot of rhetoric out there, Meta, that this cadence of new releases translates to a faster pace of progress. What would you like to say to those people?
I mean, it's possible. The only thing we have to see is how many steps back, right? That's the really important piece. It's okay if there's some regressions here and there. And I do want to caution against using subjective data sets. I did tell Elias, like, hey, I'd like to see the 90th percentile, 50th percentile, and 10th percentile, because there is a huge deviation between what people are experiencing, right? So if the 90th percentiles are not regressing, that's a good sign. If the, you know, 10th to 50th percentiles are regressing, that's okay. That's not what they're targeting right now. They're trying to make the experience for some perfect, I would imagine, while everybody else is getting pulled up. That's not the main goal. It doesn't make sense to go after the edge case that's, happening super infrequently and guarding against that while you're trying to tackle the most common edge cases first. But, some people are going to get really excited that their edge case got handled, and then that edge case is going to regress, but their edge case might be really frequent for them, but infrequent for the fleet.
Yeah, good point. That's good feedback for Elias too.
Yeah, like averages lose a lot of information. You got to look at percentiles or standard deviation.
Mm-hmm. Have you spent much time in that tracker where you kind of see the other screens? We're talking like more than 100 screens on that tracker. People just look at that one figure and leave.
No, I've looked
But there's a
around.
lot of data.
I've looked around, and that's why I mentioned to him the particular feedback I gave. The main problem I have is if we try to find a way, the main criticism is always people are having subjective experiences that differ with the tracker. And the best way to deal with that kind of that kind of differentiation in experience, in my opinion, is to let the data show that rather than try to hide that.
Okay, good. Any other? Oh, you're leaving. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Okay. If Bradford wants to come up and maybe chat about the near term of the stock price or Q1 earnings, Tesla Energy, his FSD take is welcome to come up. Any other questions for Omar or Mike? Please request to speak. Mike, do you have a prediction on how far the stock price declines this year?
Wow. I'm surprised that it has held up so well with the bad deliveries and kind of the fixed cost, variable cost deleverage that I think we're going to see in the first quarter numbers. I'm guessing they're going to be negative on a GAAP basis. I don't care personally. I'm a long-term investor. I actually would welcome a cheaper stock price to buy more shares. I think everything about Tesla's future is AI and FSD. The best expression of real world AI, moving people and things around the planet, is tens of trillions of dollars of economic value. That's my focus. I think in the short term, I'll analogize with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a market capitalization today of about $1.35 trillion. And generally, Bitcoin is not used for the purchase of goods and services, certainly not in developed markets. To a greater extent, it's used in emerging markets. But most of the value, well, almost all of the value of Bitcoin is finite supply and a very preferable storehold of value. Tesla, when it comes to AI, I think there's a lot of investors around the world that see Tesla's opportunity in real world AI. And regardless of the short term financial impact of a downturn in deliveries and that fixed cost, variable cost deleverage that could impact financial results, I think investors really are seeing Tesla in its AI opportunity, and that's why the stock hasn't gone down. I thought it was going to go down dramatically based on deliveries and forecasts for negative earnings in the first quarter. Just trying to understand why it hasn't, and maybe that's the explanation.
Thank you, Mike. I'm trying to get James Cat in here too. Matt Smith is now on the speaker board. If Bradford also would like to come up, he's welcome. Anyone else who takes a deep dive look at forecasting to quarterly financials, you're welcome to come up to speaker board and we can have a good discussion. Matt, welcome. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks, Yaman. How are you?
I'm good. So James Cat a couple of days ago put out and said maybe Tesla will have a negative free cash flow in Q1. I personally think that's a given. And Mike just mentioned that he believes that Tesla will have a negative GAAP earnings as well. And I think that's possible. Where do you stand on both of those?
Yeah, so I'll take what I view as the easier one first, and that is the GAAP earnings being negative. I think there's very low likelihood of that. They'd have to have some pretty significant destruction in margins for that to happen. Where Wall Street's coming in is actually pretty close to where I am. I'm in the roughly 49-50 cent sort of range on earnings per share. So to get to the level where they'd actually have a GAAP loss, there'd either have to be some kind of one-time item, which everyone would shrug off, or like a catastrophically bad margin, which I just don't see. I do assume their margins are going to decrease. The way that I do it is kind of by looking at their what I call their core manufacturing margin. So if you back out FSD sales and credit, and you got to make an estimate on FSD, so it's an imperfect science. But if you do that to try to back into how profitable their core manufacturing is, I assumed a 200 basis point reduction quarter over quarter, and was still getting 50 cents ish in earnings per share, adjusted earnings per share. So GAAP earnings per share is like low 40s. So to get to the point where that would get completely eroded, you'd have to have it'd be extremely bad. So I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to have like a GAAP loss. On the cash flow side, when I was doing my modeling, I was coming up with roughly cash flow neutral. But I would take that with a grain of salt, because when I was first doing this, I was assuming that there was no significant uptick in CapEx. But I think with the compute increases that we've seen, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think it's actually somewhat likely that they're going to have a spike in CapEx this quarter related to all the GPUs from NVIDIA that they've been buying. So that's kind of where I am at a high level on both of those two items, and happy to kind of go into it more in specifics if anyone's interested.
Yeah, we are very interested. Thank you very much for sharing. Any questions for Matt? Please request to speak. Matt, what is the gross margin you're assuming for automotive for Q1?
So I have to pull it up here for a second. So
while you do that, so the thing that concerns me is what Mike mentioned earlier, which is fixed cost deleveraging. Obviously, delivery dropped quite a bit from Q4 to Q1. A large gap between production and deliveries, and so I think that maybe gross margin may drop a little bit more than people expect, generally speaking.
Yeah, I that's definitely at play here. That's in fact the main reason for the margin to contract. So I'm at 18.1%, which if you look at it sequentially, it doesn't look like it's super conservative. But that's why I think it's actually really important to back out the credits and the full self-driving, because my estimate of those items in Q4 was around $1 billion. And so I'm assuming that that's roughly the same in Q1. And so then your actual kind of automotive, like what I was calling your core manufacturing gross margin, decreases by about $1 billion. But when all that math kind of shakes out, you're getting an 18.1% gross margin. So if I were to assume like a much more catastrophic core manufacturing margin, like bringing it down 400 basis points rather than 200 basis points, let me just run that through right now. So then I'm getting a 16% automotive gross margin, and then adjusted earnings per share still 35 cents. So I'm just finding it very hard to get to the level where it's actually like catastrophic, as I've heard some of the people getting there describing. It's possible, I suppose, but I'd have to be off on some other stuff.
Mike, what do you think? Thank you, Matt. Mike, are you there?
Sorry, Yaman. I haven't modeled anything, just my experience with manufacturing companies when
Matt, can you hear
No,
Mike?
it sounded like he just cut off in the middle of his sentence.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, can you say the specific numbers again for the sensitivity analysis that you just presented? If the margin drops to what level you said you still don't see it?
Yeah. Okay. So the my base case scenario is that your what I was this is a non-reported metric, but it's one that I've been using for years to do my own modeling, and I found it's reasonably accurate. The core manufacturing gross margin. So if you essentially back out your FSD and your credit sales, and you have to make an estimate of those. But then you back that out to get to what's your gross margin just on the vehicles that you've sold, just the hardware. So in Q4, when I was doing that estimate, I was coming up with 14.3%. And then when you add in all the other stuff, what gets reported is 18.9%. So if I drop that core manufacturing gross margin by 2% to 12.3%, then I'm getting an overall automotive gross margin of.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. How did you come out with that 2% figure?
So it's an estimate, because you like I've done extremely detailed modeling on a plant by plant and vehicle by vehicle basis. When I have done that in the past, I've actually found my model to be less accurate than when I make an estimate based on some of the qualitative things that we know are going on in the quarter. So qualitatively, we know this quarter, like the fixed cost absorption is going to be very bad, just for example. So you're just trying to weigh all the different items going on, like, what's the mix of vehicles? Is there a lot of S and X? Kind of make an estimate of that. Were there price decreases? Things like that to try to hone in on what has changed quarter over quarter.
Okay, so you and I both agree, and I think Mike agrees. Mike is having connection issues, so he had to drop off. But that fixed cost absorption is going to be bad. What about the discounting on the new inventory page? So this quarter in Q1, it started out a little earlier than usual. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's just so hard to isolate any one of these items and identify how big of a deal that might be quarter over quarter. I agree with you. It sounds like there was probably a little bit more discounting, but it's just one of those things that it's very hard to put a number on. Okay, how much of an impact is that actually going to have? I was a little bit, when I was forecasting Q4, I was very concerned about the discounting. So I was coming up with earnings per share a fair amount lower than where they actually ended up. So, I'm hopeful that it won't be as bad as I was thinking it was in Q4, but there's really, because of the lack of detail around all these different variables that go into it, you just have to kind of make an educated guess on how it all shakes out together.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, Matt, congratulations for doing the modeling. It's too time consuming for me, frankly. It's a wild guess that I'm making. I've got a lot of experience with manufacturing companies. When there's declining deliveries. It is an exponential deleverage in the fixed costs. I remember on the fourth quarter earnings call, there's going to be a step up in January of wages across 200,000 Tesla employees on the manufacturing side of the business. Which I think is going to be a pretty big impact on operating expenses. So yeah, just a wild guess on my part, but I hope you're right.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, what we saw the benefit of like better fixed cost absorption when Shanghai ramped up a couple of years ago. So like it's a very real thing, but trying to guess the magnitude of it is what's important. And I guess the thing that gives me a little bit more comfort that this isn't going to be some catastrophic bad news that's going to send the stock down to like 100 is even if I and modeling like much more drastic reductions to the point where I think it's highly unlikely that they would get that low. We're still in positive, GAAP earnings per share territory.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
I'll just say one more thing, Yaman. I don't think it matters as in terms of the stock price reaction. I think everything is going to come down to the earnings call and the relative optimism regarding RoboTaxi and FSD. I think the entire call is going to be focused on FSD, as it should be, giving color as to the path, the progress, the architecture changes, and how that allows for quicker iteration. So I think everyone's focus is going to be on the earnings call, not on first quarter earnings.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mike, that FSD is very important. Optimus, I think, is going to comprise majority of the intrinsic value for the company in the coming decades. But at the same time, obviously, Wall Street analysts are very much focused on the last quarter, the next quarter. And I mean, unless you believe FSD will dramatically impact the bottom line in the coming months, I just don't. I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that everyone is going to care about FSD only and not about margins. And last night I was on a macro-related space, and you kind of obviously Elon comes up, Tesla comes up, and somebody said verbatim, none of Elon's companies are profitable. They're all focused, or they're all benefit from government subsidies. That's the only reason why they have a positive line. And we know for a fact that's not correct. We know for a fact that's a false statement. And not a single person corrected that speaker. And so, if the bottom line of Q1 is negative, then, I think that would have some impact. But Omar, what do you think?
Well, I would love if everybody just focused on FSD all the time, but obviously they're going to be looking at the earnings. They're going to be looking at what the forecast is for the year. I mean, if they reported a net income loss, you wouldn't hear the ends of it. Jim Chanos would take out one of those planes that writes in the sky, Tesla posted a loss. The Bears would never shut up about it. They are just salivating, waiting for these financial results. So I hope they've got something up their sleeve. But it could get ugly.
Matt, what do you think? What do you think will be the kind of average market participant will be focused on, let's say, in the earnings release and then in the subsequent earnings call?
Yeah, so I didn't hear the first part of what Yaman said. I had issue with spaces. I couldn't hear, or sorry, with what Omar said. So I didn't hear exactly the whole context. But like, I think for your average kind of like what's going to move the stock in the short term, it's probably going to be anything to do with outlook on like deliveries. I think what has the market so spooked right now is deliveries were down year over year, down like significantly. And so is there a risk that Q2 deliveries are down again, and maybe we even have like a decrease in deliveries in 2024 relative to 2023? That's, I think, the big fear on like your average kind of investors and probably Wall Street's mind right now is like what level of certainty do we have that like 2024 isn't going to be just a total shit show? Um, so I don't think they'll be able to give much insight in this. I mean, the one time that they really did try to give some confidence around that was, I think it was last year in the Q1 call, actually. Zach Kirkhorn gave some guidance on, even though they had these big price cuts, I think he gave some strong guidance on what they were modeling for earnings for the rest of the year, and they immediately missed on that. So I think there's just, because you can order a car today and get it delivered in a week, like Tesla doesn't even know what the outlook for this year is going to be. So it's very hard for them to give any sort of guidance that's going to be reassuring. So absent that, what I think is like the only wild card that could maybe move the stock a little bit, and I think it's unlikely that they'd share anything on this front, but if they did, it'd be very interesting, is they shared any sort of metrics around how successful the FSD test drives for new deliveries has been, and or anything that they can share around subscriptions after the FSD demo went out. I think it's probably going to be too early to have any meaningful results from that. But if there was some sort of statistic like, we gave FSD beta test drives to 100,000 people at the end of the quarter or something like that, and 20% of them signed up for a subscription. Like something like that would be like very impactful in that it would force analysts to start to model in like higher take rates. But I just don't think that's likely, but something that could be a wild card on the positive direction.
What about Tesla Energy? Tesla Energy, I think, has, they obviously have higher gross margin than Tesla Automotive. And if you expect Tesla Automotive margins to drop even further, and Tesla Energy Electric Factory is, continuing to ramp, and maybe they had a couple of quarters now to smooth out production a little bit, do you think that would be a good positive surprise?
So it could be, but we already know the units or the gigawatt hours deployed in Q1, and it was a good number, but it was just 2% higher than it was in Q3. So as long as there's not any kind of crazy surprise, I think your earnings from Megapacks are going to be roughly slightly higher, is the way that I'm modeling it, from where it was in Q3 2023. So I mean, it's becoming a more important story. When I'm doing just some quick math here, I'm showing that like the energy gross profit is going to be about, let me see here, like 12.5% of the total gross profit for Tesla. So it's becoming the sort of thing that analysts can't ignore anymore. But it's also not the sort of thing that's going to offset any losses they might have from further price cuts or lower delivery forecasts, anything like that. So eventually, when they ramp up to the full 40 gigawatt hours at Lathrop, and the mega factory Shanghai rolls on, like of course that's going to be very meaningful. But I think those are in the 2025 plus, I think, territory as to when it's going to be a financial impact. I mean, energy just in general,
Okay.
like there's such a lag with when they like start ramping up to when the revenue and margins are actually recognized. It's very laggy compared to automotive.
Okay, great. And then I actually want to, obviously you focus a lot on Tesla Energy with your experience as well. Is Tesla Energy growth being held back by interconnect backlog?
So you could say that it is, to the extent that it is like the interconnection being finalized is one of the preconditions for recognizing one of the final tranches of revenue. So if you've got some project and you want a Megapack to be part of your solar and storage site, the way that the accounting for it works is you might sign a contract with Tesla, you make a little down payment, but that doesn't become revenue until like maybe Tesla actually builds it. then they might recognize a chunk of the revenue, a chunk more when it's delivered, a chunk more when it's kind of energized and they can do some testing. And the final chunk that can be recognized isn't going to be until the interconnection is operational and the project is commercial. And that whole process from maybe when the Megapack is first produced to when the interconnect is signed and you can recognize that final tranche of revenue, that could be 18 months, in some cases, maybe even longer. So if the delay in interconnect is maybe delaying some of the recognition of the revenue, but I think the much more important thing for Tesla investors is like the delay in interconnect is like making it extremely valuable to have more megapacks. Like the demand for megapacks is still gigantic because the grid issues are frankly a lot worse than almost anybody was expecting. The intermittency, the volatility of pricing, and just the role and the economic value that batteries can provide is very strong. So I think that the bigger thing limiting the growth of energy is just ramping up production, and I don't know why it's taking so long to ramp up Lathrop.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a dedicated bear in this space. Tesla FUD News is an actual bear who bets against the company. And previously he was a bull. And we had a big Tesla bull bear debate the other day. And since that debate went well, we've had more bears come into the space. And, we're working together to kind of get to the facts, get down to the facts. And he has a question for you, I think. Fud, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about energy specifically because I know that they did have these high ASPs in the past, and the price of one of these mega packs was 2.4 million. But I believe the current price is 2 million, which is down 23%. So combined with higher wages in Fremont, do you see that gross margins for energy might actually come down in this case?
So I don't think so. I think the best way to look at it is on a dollar per kilowatt hour basis. So I haven't checked it in the last, say, month, but last I checked, the dollar per kilowatt hour of a megapack was still in the quite healthy, $450 or so range. I also saw today somewhere on Twitter that there was confirmation that they're actually using LFP in megapacks for the first time. So that's going to go a long way toward lowering costs overall. So like if the pricing goes down, of course that'll hurt margins, but I just haven't seen.
Wasn't Lathrop always LFP and Giga Nevada was the nickel battery?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, also the higher wages of Fremont or the California higher wages of Lathrop has always been there, right? The only thing that's really changing from previous quarters is that production has ramped a little bit more. The factory, Mega Factory, has had more experience producing, and the supply chain has had a little bit more experience. The logistics a little bit more experience. And also, lithium prices have come down substantially. So, I don't see Tesla Energy margins going down from here. If anything, I think they'll go higher. The question is, how much higher? Matt, where do you think Tesla Energy margins will be throughout the coming quarters? Gross margin.
Yeah, so just to follow up, I just did a very quick check based on pricing on their website, and the number I was coming up with was $438 per kilowatt hour. So certainly very healthy. And I wouldn't expect there to be any sort of margin pressure on that, especially based on the kind of backlog. Earliest you can get one delivered right now is Q1 of 2025. So they would only be lowering prices if there was a demand problem, and it doesn't seem to me that there's any kind of credible source to believe that there's a demand problem. We already know that the overall energy gross margins are in the 25% range. I think it was 24.4% in Q3. It was 22% in Q4. But keep in mind that Q4 stationary storage margins were down. So the real kind of money is on the margins on the stationary storage side. The solar side is a lot less profitable. So to the extent you've got more stationary storage being deployed, which we do have in Q1, that's going to help margins. So, I'm modeling 25% kind of going forward. I think that's reasonable. They're essentially already there, and I don't think there's much reason to believe that they should be going down from where they already are, essentially.
Fudd,
I believe that they do.
any questions for Fudd or Matt Smith? Please request to speak. We have half hour to go. Any questions for Matt? Please request.
Yeah, I believe that they did like cut Megapack slightly. It was just 10,000, so half a percentage point. But I do find it hard to believe that I guess like Q2 and going forward it would be higher. It might like stabilize depending on this. But you did make the claim that if the demand wasn't good, they would have to cut. Although this is not a big cut, so I'm not gonna make any conclusion about this. But this is a sign that maybe it might be not as strong as they expected, or maybe this small price cut is just a way to make headlines and maybe bring more attention to this.
Well, so the other possibility is they do have a mechanism for passing through some of the lithium prices to their end customers. So it's possible just that as lithium prices have come down, the base price that they're listing has come down, but it's kind of a net neutral, because if they had retained the higher base price, they would have just ended up crediting more of that on the ultimate sale price due to the lithium price pass through. So to me, that seems like a more reasonable explanation than kind of anything we can extrapolate on supply and demand.
Do they
No
do they
hands
buy
mode,
this
guys. No
lithium,
hands
or do
mode.
they just buy the batteries? Because if they don't buy the lithium, then it's technically going to be Panasonic or whoever that makes it that is going to be able to just pass them lower battery prices. So I'm curious about which factor is it in terms of the lower pricing in order to lower COGS.
So the majority of these are coming from CATL, and so I don't have specifics. I mean, those are private contracts, but what I've heard is that Tesla does pass on those costs to the end customer, and I can't imagine they would do that if there wasn't a very similar arrangement with CATL, because I mean they're both CATL and Tesla are intermediaries between the ultimate buyer and the lithium miner. So I think it's reasonable to assume that both CATL and Tesla would just be passing on the cost from one to another up to the final buyer.
All right. Any other questions for Fed? Matt or Fudd? Please request to speak. Matt, anything else on your radar for the coming weeks and months other than Q1 financials? We talked a little bit about FSD. We talked to ad nauseum about FSD in the space, and while I have you, I kind of want to focus on Tesla Energy because I don't think we covered that as much as we should.
Yeah, I mean, FSD is honestly what I'm super excited about right now. But I mean, on the energy side, it is. I think it's just going to be a slow burn. Like I've looked at Wall Street analysts' forecast for, I don't know, like say 2026, and they're basically just not assuming that energy grows to the like 100 gigawatt hour or more capacity by that time. And that's just kind of a crazy assumption in my mind. Now, I have been kind of disappointed that like the Gigafactory Nevada expansion, which is supposed to be 100 gigawatt hours of additional capacity, that doesn't seem to be really moving very quickly. So that's a little bit frustrating. But I think most of those were going to be dedicated to RoboTaxi, or not to RoboTaxi, sorry, to automotive. But Elon did say at that event that a portion of the 4680 cells being produced there would go into megapacks and stationary storage. So that was a really interesting item that caught my mind, because whenever they do ramp that Nevada plant to full capacity, there's going to be I think it was about $4.9 billion of tax credits that Tesla would be eligible for every single year, just on the $49 per kilowatt hour credit on those incremental 4680 cells. So I'm looking forward to that ramping up again, but that seems to be going a little bit slow. That's kind of the story of energy in general. Is just it's gone slower than I think we might have thought.
Well, you've always been very conservative when it comes to forecasting Tesla Energy, whether it's revenue growth or margins. So I would say you've been spot on when it comes to this stuff.
Well, so I mean, there were some people like 2 or 3 years ago who were basically saying like it's going to grow at 100% per year and at better margins, and then like by 2030 it'll be more than Tesla, Automotive, and like I would say my main forecast was just saying like no, that's wildly optimistic. That's not going to happen. But I think my own forecasts have even been too aggressive compared to what we've actually seen. So there were just a couple of years where energy was basically in the doldrums, where solar has basically died, which I was not forecasting. I do hope they get the solar roof figured out at some point, because I think that's a great product, but it's just they can't figure out how to do it profitably right now, which is a bummer. But yeah, solar has really not gone anywhere, and then stationary storage has just been very slow. But it was because they were cell constrained for a long time, and now they're not. But now we just have to kind of reaccelerate that growth. So we lost a couple of years, I think, of growth potential on that side of the business, but we're definitely starting to ramp up right now. And if you look at what's going on in the energy space, it's hard not to get excited as long as you have a long-term view, because it's not going to be the savior of earnings per share in 2024.
All right. We have about 20 minutes to go. We have 2 new speakers on the board. If you have any questions for Matt or any of the other speakers, or Omar's here as well, please request to speak. Let's go to Eli Burton. Eli, go ahead.
Hey guys, yeah, I just saw Mars joined, and I was coming in to join the conversation on the stock for this year.
All right, great. Well, I think Omar might be having some connection issues, but while we wait for him to come back, if he does, Grant, go ahead.
Hey, honestly, didn't have much to say. Was just kind of listening in, but happy to be here.
Okay. Grant is another bear in the space that is actually betting against the company. So we have 2 bulls, 2 bears on the board right now. Interesting.
And betting against Tesla is a dangerous proposition, especially at this market cap, I think.
Well, shots fired.
I'll respond to it. I mean, that's an interesting comment, because I almost feel the opposite. I mean, it's a lot harder for a business to 10x from $500 billion than where it was in 2019, 2020. I mean, I kind of feel like the upside is capped. I know you guys don't think that, but that's just my perspective.
Well, I'm actually going to agree with you. I think way too many people think how easy the next 10x is absurd, because the law of large numbers are such that very quickly we end up reaching the wealth of all of human history. However, I do think a 2x is far more likely than a 50% drop.
Yeah, and I've got a question on that, because the difficulty of a 10x has nothing to do, in my mind, with how probable you think it is that we go down from here. So aside from not believing in the bull case, why are you on the bull side, or sorry, on the bear side?
Yeah, I think that the current situation, which is kind of characterized in my mind by a stale model lineup, price cuts, EPS just kind of getting eviscerated, all the above, has been somewhat predictable. I mean, I've been around the stock for a couple years, and going back 2 years, I think I was telling some of the bulls who had these forecasts like 30% gross margins are going to be tough. That's not an easy thing to accomplish in the auto space. I've been a cynic when it comes to a lot of the commitments and promises that Elon's made around full self-driving as well. I'm definitely curious to see what the RoboTaxi represents. I definitely give V12 credit for being a big step ahead, and there's likely some value to be captured just from a really good ADAS. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious for your take on the stock. In my mind, the stock today is the value of the stock today is a function of a few things. It's what is the energy business worth, which I don't know, $50 billion, $100 billion, whatever you want to say. It's what is the value of a quasi-distressed automaker, which, look at the EPS, look at the trends, look at the challenges for the core auto business. I think it's pretty bad. What's the value of the ADAS, which I think is going to, they're doing the trials. I think that that's going to have some throughput. That is definitely a hopeful thing for the auto business. They're both kind of linked. And then what are the values of Elon's promises concerning RoboTaxis, Tesla Bot, Dojo, pick any number of them, That's how it splits out in my mind. I don't give a lot to the latter bucket. energy is kind of immaterial, even if there's some potential there. And I'm just looking at the valuation, I can't reconcile it.
So you currently have a bear position, I'm assuming, by either having just a straight up short or by puts. In your mind, what's the price target at which, or what's the market cap at which you cover and say, okay, I think this is the bottom? I'm really actually just curious.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I think that the actual value is probably like, I don't know, 80. I mean, something like that. I don't think it's ever going to go that low because I think that there's such a rabid fan base of Tesla as a stock, as a car company, and a lot of these people in this forum are going to go out and like mortgage their home to, YOLO into the stock if it hits 100 again. I mean, we saw that the last time that it dipped down. So I would cover it like 150, partially 140. I'm not like a doom and gloom person that thinks it's going to like $20 or whatever. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I've got some shorter term puts, but I try to be pretty measured about it. I'm not a zealot. I did cover half of a position that I'd opened up almost a year ago and added to about a month ago when there was a lot of hype around the new version of FSD, because I think if you're paying attention to the market, anything with AI hype is something that you want to be pretty careful around.
So you seem to have a pretty reasonable position on this, and you're not looking to get killed in the market. What would have to change in Tesla's execution that would turn you from bearish on the stock performance to bullish?
I mean, at this price point, they would have to have RoboTaxis operating somewhere. Like literally. I think the other thing that I've been pretty outspoken about is that the tech is one thing, the regulatory environment is another. Like when the tech is ready, if it were ready completely, 100% good to go today, perfect driving everywhere, I just don't know what the actual throughput would be. I don't know that it's as simple as people make it out to be in terms of deploying it, monetizing it, all the above. It's something that's likely going to be illegal in a lot of places, and it's going to be a long, long slog to get it actually out in the wild, in my mind.
I mean, we can look at any of the markets that Waymo's operating, right? That those are kind of like slam dunk first out the gate markets. But yeah, I mean, you definitely have a point. It's going to be a curve of adoption, in some places being very supportive of it, allowing it to go in very quickly, and then others that are actually trying to ban it and outlaw it. So, yeah, the rollout on that will be more complicated than people are thinking.
Yep, agreed.
Matt, how is FSD doing for you? You've had a couple of tweaks and threads on the software. I know you kind of been more positive lately than about 6 months, a year ago, like most people. Do you see Tesla starting a robotaxi service in some geography, like Grant mentioned, anytime soon?
So I try to be like very measured and realistic about it. I mean, honestly, I've got some empathy for Grant's mindset around this because I think I try to be extremely realistic too, but I'm ending up on the bull side. Um, what I need to see before I really start thinking about robo-taxis as a possibility is like months on end of no interventions. I mean, I had one. Wasn't quite safety critical, but what one intervention where it actually like creeped into the road towards oncoming traffic. It wasn't a problem. Like there was enough space where even if it just stayed right where it was, people would have braked, and I imagine the Tesla would have found a way out of there. Um, but like you really need those types of instances to be extremely rare, like where the whole fleet might have like one a month or something like that. Maybe I mean maybe a little bit higher than that. But so what I'm really trying to track is what's the pace of improvement. And V12 is a huge step change in terms of comfort. Um, yeah, in terms of like the types of mistakes that it's making, the quantity of mistakes it's making, like everything, every single metric is drastically better. And it like the rate of improvement from 12.1 to 12.2 to 12.3, like that's been extremely encouraging. So I think what I would need to see to have confidence around like a time frame of RoboTaxi is just like the cadence of improvements to kind of continue at where it is right now. So maybe we get summons, actually smart summon and banish shipped in the next month. We got like more major improvements coming that where there's like the little kind of frequent annoyances that I still have those get fixed, and then it's just after that it becomes extremely rare to actually have an intervention, especially a safety critical one. So I don't think they're too far off from that right now, but the proof's going to be in the pudding. So it's very hard to make a forecast until we actually see it, I think.
Matt,
but like if I was forced to, I'd say a couple of years probably.
Matt is absolutely right. So when we evaluate where FSD is at in its path to actually, let's say, hitting L4 autonomy, it's not zero intervention drives are nice. They make nice hype. A 50 miles in a zero intervention drive is fantastic. These things need to be going 50,000 miles without having a crash that would have been prevented by an intervention. Um, and also, if we really want to be honest with ourselves and evaluating where FSD is at, which I think Matt is clearly as an analyst, I think some other people in this group are as well. We can't measure it by its successes. We have to measure it by its failures. Where is it failing? How is it failing? How do we eliminate those failures? And how do we get it down to such a point that the failures that it has are such low probability occurrence events that we are willing to accept the risk? And right now, we still have plenty of failures that are not acceptable risks. And as we watch rate of improvement, although it's fun when it's like, oh, wow, look at how good it took that roundabout. Fantastic. That's great stuff. But it's really about finding those common failures, eliminating all those common failures, and then continuing to go down the list to less and less common failures until we pass a threshold that outperforms human safety standards of driving, but more importantly, will be approved for regulators. So that's what I'm really looking at. I'm watching as the failures decrease and as the types of failures decrease as well.
Thanks, guys. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. Gary.
Yeah, Matt, had you figured in what of the 17,000 other vehicles would be the Cybertruck, and the Cybertruck revenues would be, I guess, padded with the foundation premium? Because I'm just sort of thinking, just 10,000 deliveries of Cybertruck anytime within this year is going to be $1 billion in revenue right there. And so at 50,000, 5 billion. So just questioning if you knew or guesstimated what the numbers are for Q1.
So for Q1, I think it's not that impactful. Actually, it might be inflating them a little bit. Let me clarify what I mean. Like Elon has said that as Cybertruck is ramping, it's going to be like cash flow negative essentially. And so with any of the ramps we've seen, the initial few quarters are actually a drag on overall profitability. So even though these are $100,000 foundation series vehicles, I'm sure like the revenue impact is going to be very real, but I expect the gross margin on them is going to be like, I don't know, 0 or 5% or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be very material. It is a small number, especially for Q1. I think I was estimating 3,000 units. So my point of view is it's almost immaterial for Q1 and not that material going forward.
Yeah. All right. We have news that 12.3.4 is now rolling out beyond employees. 12.3.4 is now rolling out beyond employees. And to speak on that, Omar, go ahead.
So we saw FSD 12.3.4 roll out to employees last night. It's now going out to customers. I've received it on my Hardware 3 and my Hardware 4 Model S, and it looks like it's shipping to legacy SNX owners for the first time. So good to see them expanding to some new models that haven't tried FSD 12 yet.
That is fantastic news. I don't know if you saw the meme I posted this morning, Omar, like literally an hour ago, of the Pablo Escobar meme of legacy SNX owners waiting for that push notification of the download update. Like literally just an hour ago. That's so funny. Well,
thank you. Yoda, go ahead.
Yeah, I think looking at interventions is going to become the wrong metric to look at. I guess my question for Omar is, when do you think FSD will reach 6 billion miles, or if you prefer 6.9 billion miles?
I don't know. I mean, I think they'll pass. I think they'll pass 2 billion by the end of the year at least. but we don't have a lot of data on what the long-term rate of miles added ends up being. So we really want to wait until the free trial's over and then see what the rate of miles being added looks like after that. So it's going to
Yeah,
take a couple quarters for us to just figure out how much people are even using it.
yeah. So I believe that that would be a key question to ask for the Q1 on say.com. Again, we could pick any number, but I think how how sharp of a ramp that hockey stick is would be a key question.
Thank you, Yoda. All right, we have 10 minutes to go. 10 minutes to go. Couple of speakers who haven't got the chance to speak yet. Dave, Wolf, go ahead. If you'd like to support the space, the link to Patreon is at the top of your screens. Without patrons, this space would not exist. This space is open, free, and open to everybody. I don't block anybody. We have bulls, bears, freely discussing anything on their mind. I just try to moderate for the fastest pace of learning. That's all. And if you want to support that, the link is at the top.
And thank you.
Dave.
Hey, so I occasionally drive for Uber, do that, 3 or 4 hours a day, and so I've been using FSD probably close to 95% of my time, um, and I would say it is doing quite amazing. The only problems, really, to me, are not those generally from FSD, but from navigation. Sometimes navigation puts the Tesla at intersections where it's going to have a harder time than being one block over. If they could build a few more sparks into the navigation, it would go so much easier, and there would be far fewer issues. But anyway, that was my comment.
Thank you, Dave. Jeff Reimer, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks for calling me up. I appreciate it. I assume everybody can hear me. I had a couple of responses that occurred to me. One, I don't recall who it was that mentioned that in order for Tesla to get out of the doldrums, we needed to have newer, refreshed, or additional models of vehicles. And I wanted to point out that Tesla's refreshing their vehicles every day, every week, every month, continuous upgrades and integrations of new technologies. So how does that factor into that comment or that position? Because it feels to me like maybe the consideration is how does it look on the outside? But as we all know, it's not what's on the outside that's important, it's what's on the inside. So maybe we should consider that. And then the other question or comment that I had was about somebody said, I think it was Eli, mentioned that making a 50-mile drive with no interventions is all well and good, but we need to go 50,000 or 500,000 miles or some very large number. But I would submit that if you have 10,000 50-mile drives with no interventions, you've got 500,000 miles with no interventions. So how does that factor into the calculus? Or are you saying that any one individual needs to drive for 50,000 miles without having an intervention? In that case, 4 years for any one individual in the same car? Is that how that calculates? And I'll exit the stage and listen to my answers.
You
Thank
wouldn't
you.
calculate that on an individual basis. And for exactly your point, you couldn't. It needs to be that the software's efficacy is that it is going 50,000 miles, probably even higher, but that was just an example number before a critical failure occurs. So that would be something that a metric that Tesla would be having to prove and validate from their fleet data. No individual would be required to drive 50,000 miles to prove it. That would be insane.
Machine. All right, value investor, investor.
Yeah, hi. So, one quick question which has been bothering me for some time. So, I want to understand when can we have an LLM integration? So, a feature like when we can directly talk to the car whenever the car is going wrong, like, just the previous speaker pointed out that, the navigation is wrong sometimes. And maybe we can correct the car that, tell the car that, you're going in a wrong direction and you have to go in a right direction, and we can guide the car.
Okay.
So, basically just want
Okay.
to understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Omar, what do you think?
Sorry, about what? My roommate's kind of like going insane right now, so there's this whole other thing that's happening. But what did he ask?
He asked, when will Tesla have LLMs on the car that you can talk, have a conversation with it, change, if it's going to take it the wrong turn, you can tell it to not take that turn.
Eventually, I think they will have that capability, yeah.
Okay. Grant?
Yeah, just a question for the group. I'm wondering how far off we are from FSD being able to handle the Vegas loop.
I don't think they're going to try that, Grant. Okay. Sounds like trying to bring machine up, but he's having some connection issues. Paul, go ahead. Paul Tyrell, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. Paul, you have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. All right, that's not working.
Hello, can you hear me?
What? Yeah, I think people just should skip "Can you hear me?" If we can't hear you, I'll tell you. If you request to speak multiple times, that's also increased moderation work. And we already have a lot of moderation. I can barely focus on the conversation with everything going on in the replies, in the request to speak, etc. So if I reject your request to speak and you request to speak again, I will kick you off the space. Machine, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was Jeff asking about the accident rate. I mean, it's going to have to be about 100, 200, or 300,000 miles per accident for the fleet wide, not for any one specific vehicle. So even if for you, it operates flawlessly for the entire life of the vehicle, does not mean actually statistically it'll be safe enough to deploy fleet wide. And that's why you need a lot of vehicles to collect that data to get enough statistical significance in a short period of time to prove it out. And right now we're obviously a few orders of magnitude below that. Yeah, and for the other question, just in terms about it matters more about what's inside than out. I mean, I agree. That's good personality wise. That's also what happens when your mom's mom is with me.
All right. Mark. I saw that coming from a mile away. hold on, Mark, hold on. Yoda first, go.
Yeah, for everyone who's listening in on the panel, I think we've all long forgotten the time when we first learned how to drive. You were maybe a teenager and you made some mistakes. And what got you to be a better driver? It was just the number of miles you put in. What was that? It was just video going into your brain. And then you practice with actuating the wheel and the pedals. This is exactly what is happening right now with FSD. It is driving on a good day like a teenager. It's making some mistakes. But not before long, it will get improved to be a more seasoned driver. And that is what's happening, I believe.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful space. I've been loving FSD 12.3. I had a question. I just had my first intervention while on the space. I was at an intersection and unfortunately it's all completely under construction. So there had to be a traffic cop telling people to stop and go. Interestingly enough, my car stopped as the the officer kind of stopped doing the hand movements, but that could have just been coincidence. But when it was time to go, it obviously didn't respond to that. Just wondering if anybody has an idea when FSD would be capable to actually take those inputs, or if it is now in any capacity. Thank you.
Gary?
Well, I don't think so. There was a controversy with regards to the hand gesture thing. Dirty Tesla had debunked the hand gestures recently, but I think there's been a lot of thought that perhaps that it is within the realm of the language the learning models to uh, to interpret the hand gestures of pedestrians and people out in the streets. So I don't I don't want to discount the future possibility uh, exists where a police officer can actually uh, uh, direct the FSD. Um, I think that's perfectly in the realm.
Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much for coming today. You should come more often if you can.
Hey,
Yeah,
thanks for having me up, guys. I just got the software update pushed to my Legacy S, so I got some FSD beta testing to go do.
Thank you.
happy to be here. Yaman, enjoyed the
Yeah.
conversation, so thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do want to dig into these financials a little bit more with you. We don't have that many people that look into financials line by line and quarter by quarter. And so, I think that would be a very informative discussion. I wish Machine was here earlier when we were talking about that, but he wasn't. He was probably eating some Popeye's chicken, kind of busy with running around showcasing his abs to the demographic he targets. But that's
Your
okay.
mom.
But yeah, Matt, it would be really good if you can join every now and then. All right, if you'd like to support the space, the Patreon link is at the top of our screens. I will talk to you next time.
Thanks, Yaman.
Thanks. Definitely do it again.